I'm dreaming of a European adventure led by Unai Emery. This podcast is full of Aston Villa fantasy. You're listening to Talk at the Trinity.
Gotta fall first to pick yourself up off the ground. Until you get lost, you'll never be found. And you can't start again until you break down. Break down.
Hello and welcome to the latest Talk of the Trinity podcast. I am Baz Barrett. You'll have to take my word for it if you're watching the YouTube version. With me as most of the time. But he is here today, I promise. It's not like the Masked Singer, whereby you don't know quite who is behind the mask. Is Mr. Trinity himself, Will Forrest.
Blobby.
Funnily enough, I'm going to go for an aside here. Ask you the hot question of the week, Will. Nothing to do with Villa. How much would you pay for a Mr. Blobby original costume?
I think it'd be about £65,000 I'd pay for it.
Yep. That is currently. I did wonder who was putting the bidding up on I think it is on eBay in respect of an original costume. I think it started at 60 or under 60. Now it's going up.
But it's why I haven't got the video on this week, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. But the grand reveal will be coming up in due course. And speaking of the grand reveal, you can keep up to date with all of the latest grand reveals going on at Villa Park during the January transfer window at our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. Or you can wistfully flick through our past videos. Mr. Blobby isn't in them, sadly, on our YouTube channel at Talk of the Trinity. Or if you're liking what you're hearing on our audio providers, you can continue to check us out on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Google, and we also lurk about on FanHub. Speaking of lurking around, there was an element of patience and taking your opportunity when it came required for Villa in our last Premier League outing down on the South Coast, where we went to St Mary's and came back with the 3 points after a 1-0 win. Although we did have to wait a little longer due to a drone flying over the field during the first half, which caused a delay of 10 minutes. Scurrilous rumours that Steven Gerrard was driving the drone are not confirmed at time of recording. But apart from the delights of a drone, and the 3 points, what were the key stories for you, Will, that you were taking out of Saturday's game?
Well, first of all, I think it would have been a lot more comfortable if we had an out-and-out number 9, but we don't have one. The key points to take out of the game is I'd like to think what I said pre-match with the counter attack where we need to, and the digging in deep, and maybe we didn't counter attack as much as I thought we would do, because we created some chances such as the Ramsey chance and the Leon Bailey chance, but we nicked the win, and it was a lovely, well taken header by Ollie Watkins, a proper striker's header. It looked as though Louise and Kamara were bossing it again in the centre of midfield, and if we do add to that centre midfield, they're going to have to be a top player to get either of those two out of the lineup. But the main thing for me, and I don't think it's that surprising, especially after how Southampton have been playing and with them being buoyed, was the reliance that we had on Emi Martinez and the performance that he put in. He looked so comfortable with the ball at his feet. He made some cracking saves. The one right at the very end in the last minute from Gineppo was fantastic. But I think that my favourite Martinez moment of that game was when there was a striker running through at him. He casually flicked the ball over him from outside the penalty area and just laid off a pass as he was about to be tackled from behind. I mean, that's pretty top-notch techers right there. What were your takes?
Well, that is the confidence that a World Cup winners medal can provide. But you mentioned in terms of not being able to play on the counter, that was largely because Southampton were happy to give us the ball. I mean, we talked about it in the preview as regards whether this would be a game whereby we would need to break down a team who are happy to concede the majority of possession. Villa had 63% of the possession, double the amount of shots, 16 to Southampton's 8. Both teams had 5 on target though. But in terms of, you could tell where the attacking momentum was in terms of Villa, 8 goals off target, 22 free kicks compared to 9. And just really in terms of, there was always I say always, it hasn't been that long Emre's been in charge, but the underlying fear of January has been, can we break down teams who let us have the majority of the ball, and in effect saying, go on then, see what you can do. And we left it late, but there was always an element of control over the Villa performance, even with Southampton having a disallowed goal by James Ward-Prowse. But we'll throw it out there. Do you think the decision to disallow Southampton's goal was correct?
Oh, 100%. It was a horrible, ridiculous tackle on Jacob Ramsey, and the person who did it should be banned from football for life, to be honest with you. I tell you what, though, you're talking about disallowed goals. They obviously had the one in the first half. I thought that was absolutely hilarious, that disallowed goal, because Shea Adams was offside, as was Kyle Walker-Peters when Shea Adams took the shot. So why Kyle Walker-Peters felt the need to tap the ball in on the line as well, and then to argue that he wasn't offside was quite comical, really. But no, it was, in honesty, I thought he was a little bit soft. But when you see that Ramsey's had his Achilles trod on, and Ramsey even came out and said, didn't he, some players would fall over, others wouldn't. I felt I got caught enough to fall over and win a foul. That's a winner's mentality right there. It's a shithouse mentality as well, but it's a winner's mentality, and that's something that we're growing accustomed to over the last few weeks, unless we're playing Steve Nitch in the cup.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we had said on occasions earlier on in the season that we needed more shithouses in the team, and the better teams near the top of the table do have a mastery of the dark arts, as they're called. I think in terms of my view, it falls into the category of, if it went the other way, you'd be livid. But because it goes your way, you take it knowing that at some point in the future there's going to be a knock on the door from karma, and the score, well, maybe literally might be even, depending on the time that incident occurs. But in terms of Southampton, goal disallowed, but you still got half an hour to go and get another one. So I think in terms of, you can play it a what if game in terms of, if they'd scored, what would happen? I mean, we could have gone and knocked 3 past them. You don't know, but I'd say in terms of overall, the attacking impetus was with Villa, and on a balanced play, I don't think you can particularly argue too much that Villa were deserved winners in terms of when you have to give credit for playing away from home. Even though Southampton were bottom, they were on what counts as a run of form for Southampton based on their previous season. But yeah, it's a sign of, a better team going and getting the job done in circumstances where, you're not necessarily going to be able to hit 5 or 6 past the team. But you mentioned in terms of Jacob Ramsey there, returning to the starting lineup after a spell of injury. Does Jacob, apart from insert word here in terms of getting that foul. Jacob Ramsey does what Jacob Ramsey does, doesn't he? Really had a bit of pace and attacking impetus to the team. It'll be interesting to see in terms of when John McGinn is fit. Looking at the players on the flanks, if I can call it the flanks, even though neither of them particularly wingers in the traditional sense. Buendia nominally on the left wing, Ramsey nominally on the right wing. When John McGinn comes back, where does he fit into the team?
I think you're right about Ramsey. Ramsey reminds me a little bit of a Gabriel Bonlahor in regards to his pace, his power, his little bit of naughtiness, but he's a bit cleverer than Gabby and hasn't got as many goals just yet. In regards to John McGinn, I think when he returns to the team, to be completely honest with you, I think he starts off on the bench. I don't see him getting back into the starting lineup as quickly as Jacob Ramsey has, and it's a shame for McGinn because he's done really well. But I'm always of the impression that just because you got injured, you shouldn't get straight back into the team. You should still have to work your way back in if the players have been playing well in your positions, and they all have really. I mean, if it was the Leicester game and McGinn was back for that one, would I be inclined to put him in for Ramsey? No, not at the moment. Where if it was Buendia, yes, I would be inclined to put him in for Buendia. But then you also wonder, does Coutinho actually deserve a chance there first or a potential new signing? So I think John McGinn's going to have to battle his way back in. But I think that John McGinn will do John McGinn things and he will get his way back in. He'll get the captaincy back. And I think that we'll reap the benefits of him playing in that more advanced role, which we were doing before his unfortunate hamstring injury. I mean, you'll probably say that he would come straight back into the team. If he was to, if that's what you think, then where are you playing him? Are you playing him on the flanks or are you playing him in centre mid?
I think you made a good point in terms of you got to put players in when they're fit. So in terms of it was a situation whereby you think he can't last more than an hour. I don't think we're in a situation at the moment where we're, having to throw players in because we're desperate for a result. I mean, evidently, you want to try and get as many points as you can because that's the nature of football. But a few weeks ago, we were still having to look over, maybe if not looking over our shoulders, looking in the rear view mirror just to make sure that we weren't too far, or too close to the teams behind us. Now we've been able to deal with that for the time being. There's not the pressure in terms of needing to try and force a result. I know there's been some talk of potentially a European push, and no doubt we'll come to the various polls that have been running on the @Talk Trinity Twitter page in a minute. But if he's not fit 100%, enough to play at least 75 minutes, I wouldn't risk him because especially with a hamstring injury, it's very easy to get a reoccurrence of those type of injuries if you're not fully fit. Putting that aside, when he is fully fit, I think I think there is a place for him in the team. I think in terms of his newfound, maybe not necessarily newfound, new placed, I would say, energy under Emre, kind of given a slightly more attacking role than perhaps was previously the case, and has led to an upturn in performances. I would find a place for him in the team. I mean, in terms of at the moment, we're largely playing a flat 4-4-2, whether, and just a speculation of whether Emre plays a curveball and plays a diamond in midfield, maybe, depending on the opponent. Whether you put him at the tip of the diamond, maybe, kind of more like a Scotland role, if you are going to try and match what he does for Scotland with Villa. It hasn't really been the case in his Villa career to date. But even with a flat 4-2, I probably would play him in the inverted comma flanker role when fit. I'd certainly start him ahead of Coutinho in terms of, Coutinho's getting time off the bench, but I wouldn't say he's particularly. He hasn't done terribly, but I don't think he's done enough kind of to bump his way up the queue in terms of a starting 11 position, in my view. And then depending on the team and who you're playing, maybe there's a scenario where you put Bailey on the wing, as we've discussed before, in terms of depending on the team that Villa are playing. But in terms of Leicester at home, the next game, we will be doing a preview episode closer to the time. But that is the type of team where you would feel more comfortable attacking, as opposed to having to, kind of set up a defensive shape. Yeah. Whether it's the same when it comes to the following couple of games, when we got Man City away and Arsenal at home in the space of a week, and you want a bit more solidarity, then probably you want a bit more solidarity, which lends yourself more to McGinn and playing in those type of games, because you would anticipate you will need all hands to the deck. But then on paper, giving you the sneak preview of what Talking to Trinity preview episodes are going to be like over the next month or so, we do have a run of what you'd call nicer looking games at the moment: Everton, Palace, West Ham, Bournemouth. So, but potential, for Unai Emery to work further on the attacking side of the Villa evolution, because in terms of defensively, as we touched upon previously, tactically largely there, the attacking side of it, whether we can become a free-flowing goal-scoring machine. But speaking of free-flowing goal-scoring machines, I didn't want to raise it, but it was the elephant in the room that you have briefly coughed in the direction of to stir the attention of. But you may have heard the special 5-minute Talking to Trinity episode that was released a few days ago in relation to the goal scoring machine that is, or was, Danny Ings, who, just as it looked like, may potentially be getting a run in the team after those comforting words from Emery a couple of weeks ago, has found himself, well, he's on the West Ham injury bench, actually, rather than in the starting 11 after his debut. As I said, Will did record a special reaction episode on this when news of it broke. But feeling any better, Will?
No.
There you go. That is the cutting edge reaction that we need on Talking to Trinity. But we will move it swiftly on to happier transfer news, because Dran has been confirmed. Work permit granted. Nice little welcome video from another hero of yours, Juan Pablo Angel, down at Villa Park. Still the feeling that he isn't going to be challenging Ollie Watkins right away for a starting 11 position in terms of strikers. But that business is completed, means we can dive back into the rich pool of mindless transfer speculation, which we bring you up to date with on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. So, time of recording. What's the latest transfer speculation about all players potentially going to Villa?
I think the thing with us at the moment is that we don't really know, do we? Because, and I appreciate that that's not very helpful. Neither was my last comment before. But I'm still raw. It just takes time to get over these things. Jackson was linked to us. He's off to Bournemouth. Danjuma was linked to us. He's apparently off to Spurs now. And then the one that keeps rearing its head is Matteo Guendouzi of Marseille. There's talk that it's 40 to 50 million, that potentially there's going to be a player involved. And the player that keeps getting mentioned, and I've not seen it in any media outlets, but it's Luka Dean, which I'd be shocked at, especially because it feels like he wants two good players for each position, as we touched upon in the last episode with Dave. The other player that keeps getting mentioned is Moussa Dembele, and apparently Moussa Dembele has rejected a move to Everton.
Smart lad.
He wants to come back to the Premier League, though. There's also talk as well of a big money move in Spain that hasn't pulled off, and that's that Villa were willing to pay the €45 million release clause for Nico Williams of Athletic Bilbao. However, he wants to stay in the Basque Country. So we're now apparently looking at, and you'll have to forgive me for not remembering the bloke's first name, but Enrique of Real Betis. So maybe Alex Moreno puts in a little word, lets us know what he's like, tries to get him over here, but it looks as though a striker will be coming in. For me, I'd be quite happy with Dembele, to be honest with you. You know, he's done well the last few seasons. He's dropped down the pecking order this year because of the signing of Lacazette and not wanting to sign a new contract. We're in the very good position that we can discuss with him terms for a transfer at the end of the season. And hopefully, if he's like, yeah, I'll come and join you, we could negotiate a knockdown deal with Leon at the moment. I mean, that being said, there's also been Gerard Deulofeu, who's been rumoured for a while, though those rumours seem to have died down a little bit recently. I mean, anyone that he brings in, I'm excited about. I think that they're going to be players who are going to be challenging for the first team. And I think that after the Southampton game particularly, we'll be seeing a squad that's bench is very strong. We can't be going having two goalkeepers again on the bench, to be honest with you. And especially with the sale of Danny Ings and then Morgan Sanson going out on loan. You've got Frederick Gilbert leaving on a free transfer as well. Cameron Archer, of course, has gone out on loan. He's freeing up a lot of space in that squad. And you've got to be thinking that it means that 2 or 3 players are going to be incoming. We've still got 7 or 8 days left of the transfer window. Anything can happen in football. Yes, okay, you're going to have to pay bigger fees in the January transfer window, but there's going to be some players who are considering the future because of the way that their teams are doing. There's going to be clubs who are considering players' futures as well because they're thinking, actually, they might not sign a new contract, so let's get rid of them now and let's get a little bit of money back. So it's an open market. Unfortunately, though, and you've mentioned this many, many times, you do have to pay a premium in the January sales. I mean, if out of all the players that we have been linked with, are there any that you're particularly excited about?
In terms of play, as you mentioned, January is a tricky time to get players. I mean, the Dembele one, it's an interesting kind of tactical game, as you mentioned, in terms of he's on a free transfer in the summer. He can talk to clubs abroad, including Villa. You're weighing up with somebody like Dembele. If you said you can get him on a free transfer, yeah, I mean, you would purely in terms of for the reasons you outlined there, in terms of looking to build up the squad, and he had you mentioned he had a very good season last season at Lyon, and now has gone down a pecking order, and you got a few years out of him left, you would say. So in terms of free transfer, somebody who has scored goals, I mean, yeah, decent record, and not the heights, but decent enough for a free transfer. You'd have no real complaints in terms of if he turned up at Villa on July the 1st on a free transfer. In terms of buying him in January, it does depend on what that price is, because in terms of it's easy to spend other people's money, so we will. But in terms of if you're going to say a few million euros, you may do, especially as has been aforementioned, we are only really down to one first choice striker, maybe you would take your medicine. I think if it goes like double figures, 10 million euros up, then it's like I'd be having a word with his agent, going, if we wait 6 months, would he want to come? And then if the answer's still yes, then I'd probably wait in that scenario. In terms of, unsurprisingly, we were linked with a lot of players from Villarreal, and Jackson, you mentioned, heavily linked with Bournemouth now. In a bit like, on Football Manager, when players are kind of wanted by other clubs, you can usually tell the underlying stats of how good they are based on the clubs that they're linked with. So applying that computer game knowledge to the real life scenario, the fact that he's heavily linked with Bournemouth and he worked with Emre before and Emre hasn't jumped in yet makes me think that perhaps we might be better off sitting out of that one. I think Njama, as you mentioned, to Spurs is different because Spurs are able to offer European football, and for a loan, players can sit for a few months and then see what goes on with Antonio Conte in terms of how long he sticks around for, because it appears to be a changing situation on a day-by-day basis. You mentioned Guendouzi. In terms of, funnily enough, similar to Emre, you ask an Arsenal fan about them, and you mentioned 50 million quid. You have to wait 5 minutes for them to stop laughing before they've had a serious conversation. I mean, if it's 40, 50 million quid plus din, then I think that's nuts in terms of that money. I mean, in terms of, as you mentioned, we want 2 quality players for every position. So I hope, we'll be keeping din in our pocket, as it were, rather than looking to get him out. I mean, Guendouzi, do I think he's worth 40, 50 million? Not really. To be honest, I mean, it's one of those transfers whereby you got to put the signing into the trust the manager category rather than one with any great enthusiasm, being honest.
I think the thing with him, and you'll know being a closet Arsenal fan, is that when he first came to the Premier League, he had a bit of reputation for being a bit of a hothead, for not being the greatest influence in the dressing room. But it appears that he's turned things around at Marseille, and maybe that was just what he needed to go there, to grow up a bit. He plays in a different position for them now. He plays in that advanced role and covers a hell of a lot of ground, looking at his recent heat maps compared to the more defensive-minded Arsenal role that he had. But here's a question for you then. I think I know which way you will go. 2 players that have been linked with big money over the last couple of years to us, both for around the circa 50 million mark. And the one I'm mentioning because he's had an upturn in form recently, and I've got the Southampton-Newcastle game on in the background, and he's playing incredibly well at the moment. For 50 million, would you go and get 23-year-old Matteo Guendouzi, who has gone and started proving himself in Liga 1 and he's known to Unai Emery? Or would you go and spend that 50 million on the prime James Ward-Prowse that appears for Southampton at the moment, who is also playing in a bit more of an advanced role? He's been playing behind the striker quite a bit recently. He has also played out wide for them in recent seasons. But the thing we know about him is that he knows the Premier League. He's also a player who isn't too bad at set pieces, and we've lost our penalty taker. If NSWE came up to you and said, Baz, we listen to the podcast, we love Will, can you get his autograph for us? He's not available at the moment. We'll ask you then. 50 million, Guendouzi, James Ward-Prowse, which one would you get at the moment?
Could I keep the money? Can I take it on a all expenses?
You can keep the money if you can go and put in the shifts that they can put in at Villa Park.
Well, I was going to say in terms of spending on an all expenses trip to the finest Wetherspoons establishment. So I suppose I could put the shifts in
The
behind the
new
bar,
one, Grand
maybe.
Central.
Yeah, I mean, watching the world go by there. I mean, in terms of, yeah, I don't think Prowse is worth 50 million either.
Oh no, nor do I.
To be honest, in terms of if I was going to go for one, I'd go for Guendouzi purely because he's 5 years younger. So you would hope that there's potentially there's resale value if he does an excellent job at Villa, or well, even an average job. We might, with the way inflation's going, you might make your money back in about 2 days. But yeah, I mean, in that scenario, I probably would go again Dozy. I mean, my both we mentioned in terms of Dembele in the summer being available on a free transfer. The thing with Ward-Prowse is, would you throw money at him in January, or would you wait until the summer where there's a decent, we will call it, chance at time of recording that Southampton will go down? So then in terms of you go and hover up some discounted goods like the yellow label frenzy at your local Morrison's just before closing time. So in that scenario, I'd go Guendouzi if it was you had to spend your money. I mean, Ward-Prowse is he's a good player. I'd be wary about spending 50 million on set pieces. He does a lot more. I think it's
Yeah.
a bit unfairly kind of maligned for him just being set pieces. But I think in terms of the potential versatility you mentioned of Guendouzi in terms of having played different positions would swing the vote. I think the fact he's only just, my understanding is he only signed for Marseille permanently in the summer. He was on loan there last season. That always puts the price up halfway through a season. In terms of there's no real requirement to sell in terms of like the Dembele situation with a contract expiring, and you might want to get what you can. There's not that pressure on Marseille to sell Guendouzi at this point. So I would be, as you said, January. You're always having to, if you want to do your business, you usually have to pay more, and it's a question of whether it's worth it. What I would throw, I'll take your conundrum situation and I'll twist it a little back at you in terms of, I've expressed my slight hesitation at spending 50 million on either player, but in terms of if you had to spend, and I think I know the way we'll go here, if you had to spend 50 million pounds on a striker who was worth 20, or 50 million on a midfielder who was worth 40, 30. Actually, no, yeah, we'll go that in terms of, would you drastically overspend on a striker in January if you had to spend your proverbial 50 million quid?
In the current situation we find ourselves in at the moment, we've only really having one recognised striker, and I appreciate that Leon Bailey is becoming more and more of one recently. It'd have to be the striker for me without hesitation. I think we've got a lot of very good midfielders, and we know that Nick Amber's probably going to leave, but we've still got the likes of Douglas Luiz, we've got Boubacar Kamara, we've got Leander Dendoncker, we've got Jacob Ramsey, and Buendia, Philippe Coutinho, and of course we've got John McGinn to come back as well. And really, that's an embarrassment of riches. We should, whilst it isn't the same level as Manchester City, it's still a level that should be getting you to compete in the lower top half of the table at the very least. It shouldn't be underperforming. So I'd definitely go for that striker at the moment. Who that striker would be, I don't really know. I mean, who I'd go after. I'd throw all the money at West Ham and go and get Danny Ings. But no, in all seriousness, I don't know who I'd bring in as a striker at the moment. I think I'd I'd maybe wait around to see if any clubs brought in another striker and then try and get one of theirs that was maybe a bit surplus to requirements. For example, and again, it's very hypothetical. It's a very hypothetical podcast today. It's a bit more fantasy football, isn't it, than normal. If Newcastle were to go and get another top striker to challenge Alexander Isak, then I'd be going and throwing some money at Callum Wilson and seeing if he was tempted to come to us or try and get him on loan at least. You know, I was thinking the other day, Wood have been a good signing for us, and he's probably not the type of striker that we needed. But on loan until the end of the season, he could have been a half decent shout. You know, when we needed to hold the ball up or we needed maybe a headed goal, though he hasn't scored this season. But it's an interesting market, isn't it, at the moment? There aren't that many players who really spring to mind in regards to, oh, we'd better go and get this person or that person. When you look at teams who are below us and you think about who could you go and get striker-wise, there's nobody who really jumps out. You know, Jamie Vardy a few years ago, you'd have gone after, but not at the moment. Same as Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's doing absolutely nothing at Everton at the moment, and Southampton strikers can't score for toffee. So it's one of those. I mean, can you think of any strikers that we should be going after at present, or are you in the same boat as me, thinking that there isn't really anybody?
You mentioned in terms of Calvert-Lewin, and he has had injury problems which have affected him this season. I'm going to throw another Everton name at you because it has been involved in. I do think this is, even in the speculation side of speculation, outlandish. Anthony Gordon has been, well, again, I just think it's just pure rumours rather than anything concrete currently. But if you take it at face value, there's talk. We have been linked with him along with Newcastle. Again, I'm heavy pinch of salt as regards whether that is a transfer that we would be interested in. When Chelsea were just throwing money around like it was going out of fashion, that doesn't narrow it down because they still are. But in the summer, they were linked with kind of a big money move for Gordon, and Newcastle have similarly been linked with a big money move for him as well. I've got my thoughts on Anthony Gordon, but I'll throw, because you said we're fantasy football today, I'll throw that name in the mix. If you woke up tomorrow and found that we'd spent 50 million on Anthony Gordon, what would your initial reaction be?
I would get close the Twitter app, go back on it and refresh it straight away. You know, he's the type of shithouse type player, and when he's confident, he's on form, he's a very good player. But 50 million on him when he's only played about 12 and a half games, you know, I think he's quite a lot of money. It's too much money. And that's the problem nowadays. Teams splash the cash on players who are unproven, and they go on to not be anything good. You know, not every single youngster who has a good game is going to turn out as brilliant as Jude Bellingham has at Dortmund, you know. I mean, for me, in that situation with Gordon, I'd be hoping that Newcastle got him. Because if Newcastle get him, does that mean that one of their players is surplus to requirement? And if they are, I'd be making a cheeky bid for Alan St. Maximin. I mean, he hasn't played much this season, but if you could go and put a bid in and get him for 20, 30 million, which you probably could, which would be quite a bit less than Anthony Gordon would go for, I think it'd be a far, far, far better signing. Again, it's fantasy football, but an Alan St. Maximin and Leon Bailey partnership on either flank, or St. Maximin and Ramsey on the other flank, that's gonna scare teams, and that's gonna make the whole 10 raw, in my opinion.
I'd agree in terms of Gordon. Yes, I don't think where Villa are at the moment, I don't think you could justify spending 50 million. I think
No.
teams at the moment with younger players, it's a FOMO, a fear of missing out. So it's like, let's chuck some money and hope it works out. And some players work out very well, as you mentioned, some don't. In terms of maximum, you mentioned it interesting, in terms of only 25. I thought he was a little older than that, and not kind of, maybe injuries perhaps have played a part, but as you mentioned, kind of a lot of substitutes appearances for Newcastle recently, not in the first choice 11. Let's put it this way: I'd rather have him than Chris Wood.
Yeah.
I'd say in terms of that, but we have been rowing some transfer speculation about like Handy, but we have also been seeking the views of the Villa fans on the Twitter page at Talk Trinity in terms of various polls that we have been running and various, not just linked to transfers as well. What have the fans been saying over the last week or so, Will, in respect of the Villa universe?
Well, the big talk at the moment is the positivity around the club and the run of form that we've been on since Unai Emery came in. 5 wins, 1 draw, and 1 defeat in 7 games. That's a pretty impressive record. Doesn't matter who you played against. And we've beaten some very good teams in that time. And we've also beaten some teams who you'd expect us to beat that we wouldn't normally. Looking at stats, Southampton were the 3rd team we played this season, or the 3rd time we played this season against a team who were bottom of the league, and we'd never won a game before. So we lost to West Ham 1-0 and we drew 1-1 with Forest. So it was nice to see us beat Southampton. So it's got a buzz, and we're 3 points off those European places. So we asked the question, where will we finish? Are we going to get into Europe? Are we just going to miss out? Are we going to be, top to middle of the bottom half? Or have we got a relegation battle on our hands still? And the general consensus was, we'll probably just miss out on Europe. And do you know what? If we did just miss out on Europe, I still think that would be a hell of an achievement this season for the players that we've got in relation to how they've been performing over the last few years. On paper, we should be mid-table-ish, maybe challenging for the European spaces when you look at some of the other teams and their players on paper. But for me, if we were there or thereabouts, to coin a Steve Bruce phrase, if we got 8th, 9th this season, I'd be very, very happy with that. What about yourself? Do you think 8th or 9th would be an achievement, or do you think that we're destined for greater things, or that, actually this fantasy stuff has just gone a little bit too far?
I think 8th would be an achievement for us, as in me and you, because that's where we predicted us to finish. So in terms of, I'll be happy with that. And as a spoiler alert, we will be revisiting some of our pre-season predictions in an upcoming episode. But you look in terms of where Villa are on the table and the teams above us, and off air, you have conducted a similar exercise. At the moment, we're 11th, and you got Chelsea 10th, Liverpool 9th, Brentford 8th, Fulham, Brighton that take us to 6th. And you look in terms of which teams are you going to jockey above, to get you way up the table. We're 4 points above Palace, who are in 12th. You'd think in terms of, even though by their standards they're having terrible seasons, Liverpool and Chelsea, that Chelsea is just, you buy enough players. It's kind of their mantra at the moment. How a team can spend 500 million and get worse is a rhetorical question for the ages. But them and Liverpool, you think they just through numbers, Liverpool with quality, they're not in a good run of form, but in terms of you don't become terrible players overnight, and they have players who've won numerous trophies over recent years. So you put them probably above us. Then you've got Brentford, Fulham, Brighton. And you'd think if 2 of them drop, that kind of pushes us to ninth. And if in terms of if all three of them drop, that pushes them to eighth. And you maybe suspect 2 out of the 3 might drop, which would probably be Fulham and Brentford. Brighton, can they keep it going? In terms of, see, Trossard fell out with the manager, sold to Arsenal. 27 million Arsenal pay for Trossard. I would have paid 27 million for him in terms of if that was a deal that was available, which obviously he's gone to the team top of the league, so you'd suspect no in terms of if there was a choice between Arsenal and Villa. But in terms of 8th, 9th, I think in terms of it feels roughly right based in terms of where the squad is, and also if you look at where we were, in the end of the Gerrard era, it represent a good mop up exercise. And as most football fans and most teams say in the pre-season, it just sets up a really important summer in terms of transfers, because as we've been speculating during the course of this show, need a striker, at least one, and linked with a midfielder. I think you'd have to let a few go, as you've said before, seriously look at another one, but another quality option in that midfield, you wouldn't say no to the right price and the right circumstances. You'd think in terms of another centre back. So another. We haven't even finished January yet, but big summer coming up, and I don't think we're quite in Europe. I'm not sure in terms of the permutations, in terms of if United win the League Cup or City win the FA Cup or something like that, as regards how low European places fall nowadays, as to whether it would fall to 8th. I have a feeling it won't, but I don't have those rules in front of me, unfortunately. But I think top half is it's not a time to get the parade bus kind of washed and cleaned, ready for a tour around Aston, but it represents a decent job done compared to where we were, and we've got a manager who we believe in now. A decent starting point for the summer. So I'll probably agree with the majority of fans there in terms of, I think, not quite European level at this stage, which was all Stevenage Borough's fault, because we definitely would have won the FA Cup if we would have beat Stevenage.
Yeah, no, well, the less we say about Stevenage, the better, I think. Yeah.
Definitely. And just to ensure we do not lapse into more Stevenage talk, we will bring our trip down fantasy lane to an end. You can, as we've just outlined there, keep up to date with all of the Villa news, rumours, speculation, poll, anything you want to do within reason. You can find at our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. You can check out our videos of previous episodes on our YouTube channel, Talk of the Trinity. You can listen to our audio, delightful dulcet tones on our audio providers, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. And before I pass you over to my co-host, Mr. Trinity himself, for his final thoughts. Thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate all the likes, subscribes, retweets, comments, everything else, in respect of our social media. We do have some, I think there are going to be some good episodes coming up, in terms of looking up at the transfer window, our predictions revisited. We may even have a special guest or two along the way, but just to cover myself, we may not. So thank you very much from me for listening. Much appreciated. And I'll be back with you again soon.
Let me tell you, we won't be having any special guests. They've all been blacklisted after recent comments that I'm not going to go into. But they know who they are. They know who they are. And I hope they feel ashamed of themselves. But yes, Tuesday, thank you very much for listening, for watching, for getting as much of the TOTT content as you possibly can, however you get that, whether it's via YouTube or the podcast providers that Baz listed. But at the moment, let's just enjoy and let's bask in the form that we're seeing as Unai Emery is starting to equal records and hopefully breaking them that John Gregory set 20 odd years ago. He's showing that he could be the best manager since Martin O'Neill, and that will take some beating after how well he did. But the thing that he will have in common with all of those, hopefully come the end of the season, is that he'll be leading us around Europe in a Europa League adventure. Just keep the faith. Keep the faith. And remember, he's Villa till he dies. I'm Villa till I die. Cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. Up the Villa.